we have mastered flying. We can now take off, cruise and land, and we can create and follow a route. But for accurate flying in all weather conditions, we should be using the inbuilt FSX GPS system. Based on the Garmin 295 and Garmin 500 systems, it is a really valuable tool. It actually contains far more information than is at first used by most flight simmers. It can be used in the default aircraft supplied with FSX and in some add-on aircraft, though some of the latest passenger jets now use their own flight management system and moving map display, which is actually better than the default FSX system. However, the GPS is a really useful tool. It can be used to fully monitor your progress throughout a flight, confirm precisely your position, heading, course required, airspeed, ground speed, estimated time of arrival, and many, many more things. Most of us are fairly familiar with the GPS systems that are now available for us to use on a personal basis or in our cars. And the GPS systems used in the aircraft world are basically the same. I will assume that you have used the default GPS system from time to time, and so will understand how to manipulate the basic display, including the range, the terrain map, etc., and that you can interpret the map display, though I will look at this a little later in this video. This is more of an introduction into sometimes the not often used features that have been there but not noticed, and they lurk in a margin or under a sub-menu all of the time. There may be more pages available to you than you are first aware of, and these features will enable you to use your flight in all weather conditions, nighttime conditions, IFR conditions or VFR conditions. It is well worth devoting some time to learning the features of this inbuilt GPS system, since it will bring a completely new dimension to your flying ability. Being able to fly in all these weather conditions, nighttime, heavy cloud, but still being able to see exactly where you are, how far you have to go, your intercept points, etc., a really useful tool. Well, here we are at Cardiff Airport, parked on one of the apron areas, though of course this will apply to any location that the aircraft is in, whether it be on the ground, in the air, on a runway. Wherever you wish, you can program or look at the GPS. So we will now go inside the aircraft and look at how we access the GPS for use in flight. Here I am in the 3D cockpit view in the Boeing 737 default aircraft. To access the GPS, Global Positioning System, I need to go to the views in the top menu, then down to Instrument Panel, across and down to GPS. The GPS screen will then display. Now I can remove the GPS in the same way by going to Views, Instrument Panel, GPS, and it will be removed. On this particular aircraft we have both a 3D view and a 2D view of the cockpit layout. 3D, 2D. When I am in 2D, I have a shortcut. There is a symbol here for GPS, and if I click that, I can access the GPS. I can also move the GPS to wherever I wish it to be, and I can remove it by clicking the same icon again. So I can access the GPS or remove the GPS. Now I am back in the 3D view with the GPS displayed, and as I say, I can move this to any position I wish. I can also resize it by dragging the sides in and the top or down. I can make it to whatever more convenient size I need and then move it to a good location for the flight that I am undertaking. Back in the 2D view for a moment, you can see that by resizing this I can actually find a convenient vacant space somewhere on the dash, and I could perhaps resize this so that it fits within the size of the other instruments on the main panel. That now looks as though I've got all of the instruments laid out in front of me. Now I've changed for a moment to the EXA 300S aircraft, and if we look at the cockpit on this particular aircraft, we will find that once again I have a quick click button here for me to obtain the GPS, or once again I can go Views, Instrument, GPS. Whichever method I use, you can see that this particular GPS is now different in appearance. This is the 295 version, the previous one was the 500 version. They do basically the same thing. Buttons and layouts are in slightly different positions, but fundamentally they do the same thing. Once you are used to one, you can use the other without too much problem. I am going to use the 500 version for this instructional video since it is a little clearer to see. I've now moved the aircraft to Zurich in Switzerland so that we are in terrain which contains more mountains, and we can see the mapping view on the GPS and what it will show us. Now I've enlarged the GPS screen so that we can see this a little more clearly, and using the flight planner on FSX I've put in a route from Zurich to Milan. The route is being shown here as this white line. This is the route I need to follow to head towards Milan, and the overall screen of the GPS at the moment is showing the aircraft direction. Now we need to look around this GPS and look at the various buttons and options that we have. Let's start by looking at this top switch, which is RNG, which is range. If I click up or down here, I can increase or decrease the range that I am seeing ahead of me. At the moment it is showing 10 nautical miles ahead of me. If I click this button, I can see 15 miles, 20, 35, 50, 100 and so on. So I can see all of my route or part of my route as I need as pilot. I'll leave it on 35 miles at the moment. Now I can set my view of this map in the default position, which is showing the direction of the aircraft ahead of me and the direction in which I am flying, or on the buttons in the bottom right here on the outer ring, if I select that, it will change so that I've now got a geographical position. North is now at the top, east to my right, south to the bottom, west to my left. So I can select by moving or selecting this button forward or backward. I can have direction up or north up, direction up, north up. If we look at the bottom switches here, the one that I'm going to look at first of all is FPL, flight plan. If I click flight plan, it will give me the plan that I have entered into the flight planner. So I have LSZH Zurich to Milan Malpenso LIMC. via two waypoints, KLO and SRN. And you can see that the total distance between Zurich and Malpensa is 123 nautical miles. I'll switch back to the normal view. The button next to FPL is TERR, Terrain. If I click Terrain, the map will change and show me a map view, and the higher the land, the darker the colour. And if I zoom in and out on that once again, I can get a good view of the terrain around me. So here it is relatively flat, here it is relatively mountainous. And if I switch again to my north-up view, I can see the direction geographically where those mountain ranges are. I also get in front of me a display showing me each leg. So I am going to start here at LSZH, which is Zurich, and I am flying towards KLO. That is the first waypoint in my route. I have an arrow here, a yellow arrow in the center, and if I am on track, that yellow triangle will remain in the center. If I vary from the required track that I need, this will go left or right, which is indicating to me that I am left of the track I require or right of the track I require. If I now take a look at the left-hand indications here, I have a lot of information here. The first waypoint, WPT waypoint, is KLO. The bearing of KLO, BRG, from my present position is 213 degrees. The next one is CTS, course to steer. So in order for me to get onto my desired heading of 213 from my present position, I need to steer 193 degrees. That will take me to an intercept point. ETA, estimated time of arrival. This will change depending on the speed that you are flying. The next one is VSR, vertical speed required. Now when I'm in flight, this will change and it will give me the number of feet per second that I need to climb to my required altitude. I have to multiply that number by 60 in order to get it at feet per minute. The next one is TKE. That is the current track angle error. And this will change again as we are flying and show a plus or a minus, and will show us if we are off our required track to the right, which will be a plus, or to the left, which will be a minus. And it will give us an indication of how many degrees we are away from our track. Finally, we have XTK, our cross-track error. This will give us an indication of how many miles off track we are. If we are way off track, the CDI bar, that's this one here, will be fully deflected and be of little use. But a glance at the XTK display will tell us whether we are 5 miles or 50 miles off our track. So it is a really useful assistance in following the route. The MSG, which is a bit of a nuisance because it seems to continually flash, is a means of getting any useful information that is displayed on the map as we fly. It will tell us whether we're going into restricted airspace or so on, and it will change. We can click this MSG button here. It will tell us any information that is necessary for us to know dependent on where we are, and I can click it on and off. And if I click it on and off a few times, you will find that that MSG now will go off. So it has now stopped flashing. In our general flying, we're not going to use this very much, and rather than it irritate us, it's not a bad idea to click the MSG button a few times and let that word off be visible. It won't annoy you. Once again, this little bar here is referred to as the CDI, the Course Deviation Indicator. It will tell us whether we are left or right, as I said, of our required track. Course Deviation Indicator. There is a little trap that you should be aware of on this CDI, this Course Deviation Indicator. When you are in en route mode, that is in normal flight, the full scale deviation here is 5 nautical miles. But once you are about 30 nautical miles from your destination, it will change to a full deviation scale of only 1 nautical mile. And as you enter the approach to your airport and you get into the approach area, it will scale down to just 0.3 nautical miles. So you have to be aware that this scale automatically changes and gets to a smaller scale the closer you get to the airport. Right, let's have a look before we start flying at the indications that are shown on the top of the screen. We have DTK, which is your desired track, and you have the TRK, which is your track across the ground. And the last one is the distance to the next waypoint. Distance to the next waypoint. Now the DTK and TRK are worth considering a little here, because, for example, if you were flying in a very strong northwesterly wind, the DTK might say 360 degrees, but your TRK might say only 020, because you are being blown 20 degrees off course. Very well worth noting the relevance of those two figures. Now there are several other buttons around here, and we shall look at these in more detail as we fly. We have a D here with an arrow through it, that is direct to. We have a menu button which will access a menu if and when one becomes available. A clear button that we can clear an entry, as you will see later, and an enter button that we can use to enter information. Along the bottom we also have various other buttons. We have NRST, which is nearest, that will give us our nearest airport if we need to make a sudden diversion. OBS and PROC. We'll look at these two a little bit later. PROC is procedures. If I click it, you will see there are a variety of options available, which again we will look at a little later. Procedures and OBS. Some of these things are only available in certain modes of your flight. You will see in the bottom rotating knobs area here, I can push the cursor, we will look at later. I've already shown that we can switch between north up or direction up, whichever we wish to use, and I can also click the outer ring, and that will give me information about my present position, in this case the airport. It tells me where I am, its geographical position, its elevation, the fuel that the aircraft is requiring, and so on. And there are also here a series of little boxes, and some are lit and some are not. If I click the outer ring, I can get more information on each of those boxes. In effect, they are pages. So I can select more than one page of information relative to where I am or where I am going. We will look at that in a little more detail later during a flight. Okay, let's now make a start on flying our aircraft from our desired route, and we will commence by reducing the size of the GPS screen, and I will put it into a convenient point on the left hand side of the aircraft to suit my wishes. Now I tend to put it over here. You may very well find that you wish to put it elsewhere. Obviously, if you reduce the size overall, the map becomes a slightly less clear, and you might want to zoom in or zoom out to increase the clarity, or change the terrain to a black line, to a background. Now you can see the white line that I intend to follow. So let's start by taxiing out to the runway. Now, as I taxi, you will immediately see that the map has now changed, and I am already heading towards my desired track for my input route. If I select this button once again and get geographical position, I am actually going to be heading towards generally the southerly position. As I make my final turn to the selected runway, you will see the GPS moving map changing direction as I change the direction of the aircraft. I will swing the aircraft left and right here, and you'll see that the map will swing as well. So it is a very, very accurate measurement system of our precise position. Okay, so I am now on the runway and I am about to take off. If we just check the GPS here, we can see that we've now got the borders of the surrounding countries. I have my present position and I have my desired route as a red line behind the aircraft at the moment. Obviously the position of the intended route is dependent on your position within the airport. So in my particular case, I am going to have to take off because I need to go ahead, and then once I'm airborne I need to turn right or left and come back and pick up this route. So I can take off and turn left, or I can take off and turn right. Once again, I can alter the scale of this so that I can see more or less of the route that I intend to follow, and as I increase and zoom in, I will see other waypoints and so on which will become visible to the system. So I am going to take off, and I am going to decide that I am going to turn right, come back and intercept this red line. I have set the aircraft for takeoff, altitude 9,000 feet, 1800 feet per minute, a heading of 333, that is the heading that I am pointing at the moment, a speed of 240 knots. So let's take off. 90 knots, 120, 130, 140, pull back, lift off, gear up, .200 knots, flap retraction to 2, okay, I'm going to fly the aircraft manually at the moment. I'm now going to decide to turn right, and I'm going to look at that red line on my moving map, and I'm going to turn the aircraft round to intercept it. I'm going to reduce my speed, reduce my flaps, then I am going to select autopilot, altitude hold, auto throttle on and speed. I am still steering the aircraft. Select heading on, heading off, and now I can select manual steering. Keep a check on that moving map as we turn. Now if I pause the aircraft at this point, let's just look at what is happening here. I'm going to zoom in a little on this. So at present it's 150 miles. I'm going to zoom in, that's 50 miles now. So here is the airport that I've just left. Here is the route that I require to join. You can see now that I have got my desired track at 168 degrees. And if you look at the arc of the compass that is showing, there's 150 degrees, there's 160 degrees, there's 170 degrees, and the red line is in fact exactly on 168 degrees. So I need to turn my aircraft to 168. I am presently on a track of 116, that is the track across the ground. And if you look directly ahead, you'll see that that is also true. There's 90, there's 120, and I am just short of 120. I am 116. Now, I can see from here that I need to be at a heading of 168 eventually. So, if I dial in here, first of all set the navigation switch to nav, put the flight director on, and select the required heading of 168. I can do now one of two things. I can continue flying manually until I turn the aircraft and head towards that line. I will now unpause it and continue to turn manually. I am now at a heading of 142. And if I continue around to 168, I will intercept the red line. So I have now input a heading of 168 degrees. I am presently flying at around about 160 it's 160, about 164. And if I select heading, the aircraft will automatically turn to my desired heading of 168. It sometimes takes a second or two to work out whether it should go left or right. Now you can see from this map that I need to turn right a little more. I can do that manually by altering my heading so that I will turn the aircraft to intercept that red line, or as this is GPS and autopilot, I can select the GPS position here, and instead of selecting heading, I select the VOR button. It's actually VOR localizer, and you can see that the aircraft is now automatically turning for the most efficient intercept point to this pink line. It is now doing this completely automatically. Let's look at this information again. I am going from KLO towards SRN. I need 168 track. I am actually doing 189 degrees over the ground at the moment. And the distance to SRN is 103 nautical miles, which is now counting down as I get closer to it. So, my next waypoint is SRN. The bearing in order to get to that is 170. The distance to that track I need is 195. My estimated time of arrival at my present speed is just over 15 minutes. The vertical speed is showing just under 2 because I'm almost at my set altitude of 9,000 feet. I'm presently at 8,900 and I am 22 degrees in error of my final heading at this moment. So there's a lot of information here. This is the bar here, it is showing my error, and as the system picks up the pink line it will turn left and this will then centre. I will now increase my altitude because of the mountains ahead of me to 21,500 feet. I am just about to intercept this now. The aircraft will shortly make a gentle left turn. If I zoom into it, so I'm now only showing 10 miles ahead of me, you can see that I am still not quite on that line. If I zoom out, it actually looks as though I'm on the line. This is a very useful tool to check exactly how accurate you actually are. So, a very, very useful display. If I click the terrain, you can see that I can see the ground in better detail. It will indicate all of the lakes, the things around me, and the topography of the mountains. So it's now correcting itself to pick up this track, and the yellow triangle is now more or less on centre, and I am flying between KLO and SRN. Okay, well, we're now well established on our route, and the autopilot is now following the GPS route, so we can sit back and relax basically. We have 21,500 feet in as our required altitude, and we are presently climbing through 14,000 feet towards that cruise altitude. The flight director is presently switched off. I'm going to switch this on. Now we will have the two pink crossed hairs in the display, off, on, off, on, and when we come into our final approach and landing, these may help us center the aircraft. So as the aircraft crosses the Alps, we can think about how we can use the GPS for some further systems that it has, which will help us approach and land at our required airport. Okay, let's first of all make the GPS display larger so that we can get more information seen a little more easily. So we are presently flying between KLO and SRN. If I look at that flight plan, there's KLO, SRN. LIMC is our final airport. Now at this particular moment in time, we are flying from the centre of our departure airport to the centre of our arrival airport. We don't have any runway selected, we don't have any approach selected. But the GPS system will help us in finding that information. So, if we have a look at the bottom of this panel here, we can see a number of buttons. I'm going to first of all click Flight Plan back so that we can see our route once again. And then I'm going to click Procedure, PROC. Now that gives us a moment, an opportunity to select an approach. If I want to do that, I press the Enter button. It will give me a variety of approaches and runways that I can use. Let's assume that I want to use ILS 35 left, ILS 35L. In order for me to select that, I need to scroll down the list. I can do that by using the click buttons here, the right and left arrows, until I have ILS 35L flashing. If that's the one that I want, I have to enter that as a request. Go back to the Enter, click. Now I can either choose to be vectored to that runway, or I can go via an instrument approach. So this is a star Regon or Rygon or Verse. This is a standard instrument approach, a star arrival, standard arrival. So let's assume I want to choose Rygon. I scroll down to Rygon, and I again enter it. Now, I can choose to load or activate. At this particular time, I only want to load it as a route. So, with load flashing, select Enter. I will now have an additional approach put into the system here. And if I go back to my flight plan, and I look at that in a smaller scale, I now have the remnants of a route here, which I'm a little bit further away to see clearly. So we'll look at that as we get a little more clear. At the moment, I'm on my way to SRN. That is 55 miles away. That is this point here. So, let's continue our flight until we get much closer to SRN. Okay, I am now 30 miles from SRN. I'm going to begin my slow descent. So I'm going to initially put this in to 12,000 feet, and I'm going to make a slow descent towards SRN. Now I'm quite away from it. I'm doing this slowly so that we have time to think about what it is that we are doing. By the time I reach SRN, I want to be at 12,000 feet. Now, if I look at this map once again, I can see that I've now got a new route coming here from Raigon into the airport, dotted line out. And this dotted line is the missed approach route that has been calculated. If I zoom in on that, you can see it a little more clearly. So here are the ILS approach arrows, and this is the missed approach as I come past the airport on my landing. If I need to make an aborted landing, the GPS has already given me the route out of the airport. Okay, I'm now 13 miles from SRN. I'm passing through 16,600 feet, descending to 12,000. My required airport is now diagonally to my right. Let's see if we can see that in the outside view. So here is my required airport, Milan Malpensa, at about 45 degrees from the front of the aircraft. Now we need to think about activating our final approach. Let's go back into the GPS system. Now before I go any further, it's important to know that this GPS system will not give you an auto land. It will guide you to the runway, but you as pilot will have to land the aircraft yourself. Now this particular runway is not going to have a glide slope. It will have an ILS approach which we can follow for the centre of the runway, but we will not be able to follow a glide slope. As we are now getting closer to our final waypoint here of SRN, I need to make my final approach active. Let's watch what happens. Now at the moment the aircraft is automatically turning. It's trying to follow my original route, but I wanted to go via Raigon. So, I go into procedures, I activate the approach. You can see now that it has put a new line from my present position to Raigon. So I will now fly to my desired waypoint of Raigon, and at that point it will turn to the right and follow the line to the runway. Now it's important that you just differentiate between making the system loaded or activated. So the system will now automatically turn the aircraft. Now I am going to set a new altitude to be at 6,000 feet when I get to Raigon. So now put 6,000 feet in there, and we will descend slowly to 6,000 feet. And I'm going to reduce my speed to only 175 knots. That will be my final approach speed for this aircraft. My required airport is now just behind the aircraft on the far side. Now, as I make my final descent, I'm aiming to be here 6,000 feet, but I want to be at 3,000 feet for my final approach to the airport. Now, this is where this GPS system comes in really useful. If I reach a waypoint and I am much higher than I need to be, or if air traffic controls tells me to, I need to go into a holding pattern. That is, fly in a circular motion, and if necessary descend in a descending spiral until I reach my required altitude. Now this GPS will do that automatically for you. It has a button here, OBS. It actually stands for Omni Bearing System, I believe, but we needn't worry ourselves too much about that at the moment. If I press that, it will automatically put the aircraft into a holding pattern at the next waypoint. Now, I have 7 miles to go. If I press the OBS now, I get a yellow susp above it, suspended. That is, my desired final tracking route has been suspended, and I want to go into a hold over Regon, or around Regon. So if we now watch what happens as we get closer to that particular point, we will see that the GPS and autopilot system will put us into a holding circle. We have 5 miles to run. I'm passing 10,000 feet. Now when I reach Regon, that is when the GPS will automatically turn the aircraft. So 1 mile to go. I'm still here at 9,000 feet, so I'm much higher than I need to be. So this will now put me into a turn, and I will continue in that turn until I reach my 6,000 feet altitude. It's beginning to turn now. Now you can see the aircraft turning around the area of Regon. I am presently doing 189 knots. I'm aiming to be at 175. I'm going to put 2 degrees of flaps out to assist my descent and slow the aircraft slightly. And it may require 1 circuit or more until I reach that 3,000 feet. But it will continue going round and round until I do something else. So we should just let the aircraft spiral and descend to 6,000 feet. Now the aircraft is continuing to descend, and as it does so I need to think about putting the information in for my ILS landing. I have looked in the world map area here, and I've discovered that the Malpensa ILS frequency I want is 109.10, and the course I need for that is 349. So I'm going to put that in as the aircraft is descending. So I want 349 here. And I want 109.10 in the radio. So 109.10, activate. Okay, now I am descending to 6,000. Okay, so I am now descending to 6,000, but I said that I actually wanted 3,000 for my approach altitude. So I'm going to remove the radio and I'm going to redial 3,000 feet and continue in this spiral until I reach 3,000. The aircraft is still going around Regon. Okay, at this point I'm passing through 4,000 feet. I'm still circling Regon, but I want to be at 3,000 feet before I proceed to my final approach line. So I'm going to allow the system to take me around once again. I am now passing through 3,400 feet, and at 3,000 feet I want to be back on this white line. Now we will let the system continue to turn us around until we are more or less heading back towards that white line. At that point I can click the OBS button again, and the suspend sign will go off. That means that I am instructing it to continue on my original route. That should then take us to the intercept of the ILS green arrows. And as I near those, I'm going to have to switch on the approach button for the ILS on the autopilot. As I say, this does not have a glide slope, so I am going to have to descend at the correct angle visually. We're beginning now to come back to our intended white route. As I near that, I will switch the OBS off. You can do that at any point, and the system will calculate the best way of getting to it. But if you wait until you are more or less in line with it, you will get a much smoother, more gentle turn. Okay, it's just about lining up now. So, I'm now going to switch OBS off. The suspend sign has now gone, and you will see that the aircraft is now levelling out. Is going to find its way back onto the magenta line. That's the next bit it wants to do. Okay, we are now back on track on the new line, heading into our final turn for our approach. Now I am going to switch the approach light on when I get within range of the ILS, and then I am going to follow it to the ground. There will be rather a lot going on here, and therefore it's best if I concentrate on what I'm doing rather than talk a lot. But you can follow this now as I make this approach, and the approach on the autopilot, reduce my speeds, increase my flaps, put my landing gear out, etc, etc, and try and make the perfect touchdown at Milan Malpensa. Okay, I will reduce the GPS display for clarity and ease of landing. There are my ILS bars. That is what I am going to intercept. I'm going to make this a little smaller, slide it back into the left hand side of the dash. Now I need to concentrate on what I am doing. I need to intercept this ILS. But the GPS has brought us all along the route, put us into a hold and lined us up with the final approach. When I select the approach there, the altitude hold will automatically come off because it wants to follow the glide slope. As I said, we don't have a glide slope to follow. I'm going to do the altitude myself. So I'm going to take the altitude hold off. Then I will decide on my descent rate when I get a view of the runway and follow the Varzi lights. Runway is now coming into view. Now I need to really concentrate. Gear down, flaps out. Reduce the speed. Brake armed. .15-degree flaps. About 60 speed. White, 2 red lights, on track for landing. Speed 150, 30 degrees flaps. Autopilot off, auto throttle off. Ready for landing. Throttle back. welcome to Malpensa. Well, I hope that will give you a little introduction into some of the features on the GPS. It does require practice, of course, just like all the other systems of flying, but it is a very useful tool if you can master it. Hope you enjoyed it.